3:25 exactly. We're right on schedule. We have PRC-Saltillo, Engage for emerging communication using eye tracking with Sean, and I'm sorry, Sean, Malcolmson. I hope I got your name right, Sean.
There you go. You got it in the end, Malcolmson. Yeah.
And it's all yours. Share screen, go for it. And then after that, we're going to give away some prizes at 3:45. So it's all yours, Sean.
Excellent. Thank you. Get that shared there. And so we should be seeing some software on the screen. And so, yeah, I'm going to take you through a tour of the Engage app and Engage vocabulary, which is available on PRC accent devices. And this software is designed for emerging communicators who are working to improve their access skills, so early access and early communication. So there's really two main components to this software. One is practicing access using activity-based learning. The other component is some early communication pages that are designed to still continue to practice access, but in a communication-rich environment. So a little bit different than our other communication pages in terms of the end goal there. It's really still focused on access development, and but doing it in no way of also embedding some communication into that. So my role at PRC-Saltillo, I'm the access product specialist for the company. And as I said before, this is available on the PRC devices at this point, which would be the accent line of products. So with Engage, I'm going to start by looking at some of the Engage activities. We'll talk a bit about Tomoko and target practice, and then the communication side of things. So in the Engage activities, this is a piece of software that we developed in-house and are continuing to build upon, which allows you to practice your tracking access, eye tracking access, using some video-based activities and some catch me activities. I set up a couple of samples here to show you, and then I'll show you some of the customization, because I think that's an important part of what this brings, is the ability to customize this to meet specific needs for the individuals you work with. So to start, let me just open up a sample activity here. And at this point, I have it set up so that hopefully you can see my cursor moving on the screen. Sometimes with certain video sharing, it doesn't show the cursor, but I think you see that moving over. And each time I move over a different video screen, the video will start to play. This is based on the ALP for AAC. So if you're not familiar with the ALP for AAC, you can go onto the website. It's www.alp4AAC.com. And this really looks at building some visual attention skills. So early eye tracking, trying to get attention to the screen and build attention skills, sustain attention, is what these activities are designed for. So this is a 4-video grid, but there's a lot of customization that we can do to change up these activities. So when you come into the Engage software, you can add a new activity to your activity list, and you can choose from 3 different types. I'll continue on with video grids, and then we'll talk about the others. With video grids, you can choose how many videos you want to have on the screen, up to 6. So you can choose a grid size. So similar to what we have in communication grids, we have a grid of screens here, and you can choose from 1 large screen. You can go to 2 screens and split it, 3, 4, or 6 to make them smaller and decrease the targets. Sometimes we might not need that many videos on the screen, but one benefit of the design of this is that you can leave screens blank, and that will just provide empty space and separation between your videos. So if you want to make the movement to the left and right more distinct for the user, you can just add a video to the left and add a video to the right, and anything else that doesn't have a video will become empty space and provide separation. So I can add a video onto one of the screens. There we go. And let's add another just for fun. You can choose from some videos that we have already in the software, or you can import your own MP4s and use those as well. So the Lego video that I have here is just an import that I've put in. I can add that to the screen. Once I've chosen the number of videos, chosen the videos that I want to use, I can set how long I want this activity to run for before it just automatically closes. You can choose anywhere from 30 seconds. So if they have a shorter attention span at this point, you want to run it for a short time, you can do that up to 2 minutes, or you can turn it off and then you just manually close the activity when you're done. You can also change the dwell time on the video screens. So none would be a mouse over. So for an early access user who's just getting started with eye tracking, we might want that video to play immediately as soon as their gaze hits the screen. So we set it at none. If we want to add a little bit of dwell to make more distinct selections or to let them practice that skill, then we can increase those times. And you can see here 0.3, 0.6, or 0.9. Okay. The last option in this activity is to change the background color. Some of this might be for visual needs. Some of it might just be preferences to get someone engaged in looking at the screen. So if I go with black, I'm going to get a lot more contrast. Sometimes people like to go with fancy colors just to draw attention for someone who's into colors, but that could also be to support vision depending on vision needs. So depending on your activity setup, these choices might vary depending on what you set for your activity, right? We can customize that to help. All right, so once you have your activity set up, you can name this. Sorry, my Zoom controls are blocking my keyboard. Just drag that over to the other monitor. There we go. Okay, and your new video will be added to your screen. Now, once you get the attention to the screen, we know that oftentimes that doesn't last very long for certain individuals, so they may look away. And if that's the case, then you hopefully can see my screen flashing and hear some conga drums playing in the background to try to draw attention back to the screen. As soon as that cursor hits the video again, so we get their attention back to the screen looking, the video will resume playing. So even if they start to lose focus and lose attention, we can hopefully draw them back in. All of those adjustments are made using the global settings. So we have a number of different settings that we can set here. You can turn audio cues on. So you heard the little conga loop there. There's a couple of different options that you have. Something more high energy. Just a little beep that will repeat. Kind of a little spacey sound. Something more relaxing.
Look at me.
Or some words to help get them to look back to the screen. You can also upload your own audio. So if you had something that might attract their attention better to get them to look back at the screen, you can upload your MP3 file there. You can also change the color of that visual cue. So the red border that was flashing when I stopped moving the cursor, you can change the color of that. So if we know that somebody has attraction to yellow or red or blue or green or a favorite color, we can change the visual cue to that. And that's just that outer border. Okay. So your audio cues and your visual cues are set on a timer. You can change how long between those cues if someone looks away. So 10, 20, or 30 seconds to account for things like latency or just their attention and their ability to move back to the screen within a certain amount of time. And you can also turn these cues off. So you can turn them off globally. So no cues, no audio or visual cues, or you can turn off just audio or just visual. So we took into account here in the design that there are a number of individuals that we work with who, if they hear a sound, they'll look away in order to process the audio. And that's not what we want when we're trying to gain visual attention. So it's beneficial to not have audio cues, because as soon as they hear it, they might keep looking away because they want to just keep listening and they can't look and listen at the same time. So you can turn those audio cues off if you need to. You can also turn the video sound off. So this sound option here, the sound toggle, will turn the video sounds off for the same reason. If we're trying to maintain visual attention, as soon as they start looking, the video has sound to it, and then they look away because they can't process both channels at the same time, then we haven't necessarily helped them at all. So you can turn the sound off. And this is different from just muting the device, because when we flip back to communication, we don't have the same issue. The speech for that is usually short, and it happens after they've already made the selection. We're not worried about the visual attention. So we wanted to separate the sound options here from the communication settings so that as a clinician or caregiver, you're not constantly toggling that audio back on and off if you have someone who needs the sound off in your videos. All right. So you can make these changes and you just save those changes, and it will apply globally to all of your activities at that point that you've created. All right. The video thumbnails is just more like a traditional video player where you have some thumbnails. Looking at these does not activate them until you dwell for a certain amount of time, and then the video plays not in space, but in the screen above. I guess I should ask real quick, when the video plays, does it cut my voice out, or can you hear what I'm still saying over top of it? Sometimes it cuts out. So if someone could just throw in the chat, if you can still hear what I'm saying when the audio is playing. I apologize if I cut out before. So hopefully you can hear what I'm saying here as this plays. Actually, just to make sure, since I didn't see a chat there, I'm going to turn that sound off so I can make sure that you understand this point. So when these videos are playing, one thing we're really looking for here is to watch their tracking and see where are they looking. So the cursor remains on the screen so you can track and see, are they following these objects on the screen, or are they looking off to the empty space? If you have a video that has a face, does the cursor start to move toward the eyes, nose, and mouth where we would expect? Or are they focused on other areas of the image? And that can be very telling. You can also see if they overshoot or undershoot the images on the screen. So as you see that cursor come toward, does it go past and then correct? So you can always keep an eye on the cursor and what's happening within these videos, which is good diagnostic information for you. All right, the other part of the engage activities are the catch me activities. So these are just moving objects on the screen and moving the cursor to make a selection. Fun animated images. And again, these would typically have sound, but I just don't want that sound to cut off. They all have their own unique audio file associated with them, so they're different for each one. So this one would be a drum roll. The elephant is a trumpeting elephant, etc. So they each have custom sounds that go with them. And when you create these activities, again, you have a number of settings. So you have some images that you can choose from. There's a mixture of vehicles, space, animals, fairies and princesses, and musical instruments. You can, again, choose the activity duration. So how long do you want this activity to run for before it automatically closes? Or you can select to manually close it by setting that to off. We can choose a dwell time. Again, none will just be mouse over. So early access users setting it to none so that they just have to move the mouse toward it. So we're working on movement skills versus a dwell time where we're now working on fixation and holding that gaze steady over this image. Okay. We can change the speed of how fast these move. So if we have a latency in looking, or if we have a slower eye movement, we can slow this down for them. You can change the size. So if I add one of these symbols or images, then I can see what these might look like when I change the sizes. You can also change the color of the images. So if I want to have a primarily red image, it doesn't change everything in the image, but it changes most of the image and leaves a couple of things just for bits of detail. you can pick a primary color and you can watch and see how these change. Okay. And again, you can pick a background color to provide more contrast or less contrast. If that's something you're working toward, is trying to work out figure ground, things like that, and you want to have a lower contrast situation, you can do that as well. So you can choose here from your different background color options. And then you'll see as I add more images to my list, they get checked off. These will now be part of my activity. And I can choose whether I want those images to be in a random order or if they will just appear in the order that I selected them. Okay. So that's what this randomized toggle is. If I turn that off, then they'll appear one at a time in the order that I selected. Just add a name to that, a unique name, and select finished. And now I'll be able to run my activity. Now with these activities, you can always edit what you've created. You can copy it so that you can use that as a basis for creating a new activity with just one modification to it or a couple of modifications, or you can delete them if you're not using it anymore. So I wanted to show here real quick that with the dwell time, if you add a dwell time to it, I'll add 0.9 seconds, just it makes it a little bit easier to see in the video, that if you move your mouse to the image will stop moving so that you can dwell on it and it's not moving out of your way and you keep having to chase it. So as soon as your mouse gets over it, it freezes so that you can select it. Okay. If you overshoot it, you'll see that once you get past it, it will continue moving once you're off of the image again. All right. So from here, another note, none of this interface is user selectable. So we made it so that if we're working on access for an early access user, a beginner, and they're looking at the screen, you could pause the tracking to disable their eye tracking while you're setting it up. But when you're trying to touch the screen and they're moving the cursor and then they might look at the pause resume button and resume their tracking while you're trying to edit something, and then they click on something, you didn't realize they clicked it. If you've worked with eye tracking, you've been in that situation before, I'm sure. So none of this interface is selectable with eye tracking or head tracking, any of that. It's all caregiver therapist selectable through touch, but none of it will work with any tracking. So it just eliminates a lot of those issues when they're looking, you don't know where they're going to look and where they might click because they're still early access users. So you can feel confident that they won't be changing your selections on you. Now that's the same when we go into the vocabulary. We have ways to turn off the pause resume dropdown. We have ways to turn off the menu button. So you can disable these things so that individuals who are new at this aren't accidentally clicking on things that you're trying to keep them out of. Okay. So just be aware of that. All right. We got on time here. Okay.
1 minute.
All right. 1 minute.
Yep.
All right. Let me talk a little bit about some of the other page options here then, instead of the Tomoko. So if you're familiar with the Unity vocabularies and the target practice that's built in there, of course, Tomoko is going to freeze on me here, running Zoom at the same time. So you'll be familiar with the target practice options that are available in Unity. We have a lot of the same options here in the Engage setup, although we've modified the visuals on it so that there's less visual distraction, less colors, make it a lot clearer and easier for them to target. My apologies there for that delay. So if I go to something like my moving targets and I pick the ducks, I'll just run through this quickly. You can see that the target is very isolated, lots of contrast, easy to see, easy to direct your gaze toward. And then depending on your dwell and selection feedback, you can make your selections move through these activities. So we've done a lot of modification in the visuals here to try to simplify it and scale back unnecessary visual stuff. We've taken out the message window, so there's no words appearing if they're not literate yet, or your focus is solely on access. You don't have a message window to contend with. You don't have icons that tell you the status of your system, your access method, the battery life. None of that is visible. So there's nothing really to distract you so much. And again, as I mentioned, you can turn these off if you need to in order to reduce that even further. So a lot of thought and customization into how to scale this back to something that's just focused on access, not language, not increasing the cognitive load too much, and just building access skills. And I guess that's all my time.
Thank you, Sean.